First of all, I want to thank all of you for taking time out of your lives to be here and for helping to make Americans for Prosperity one of the great success stories in citizen activism around this country, because you have already made a difference this year, and it would not be changing without people like you doing this. So thank you for coming here. And I want to thank Tim. You know, that nice introduction he just gave is proof if you send a guy tapes long enough, you can get him to believe almost anything. But the truth is, in 1994, we won a resounding victory with the contract with America because millions of Americans got engaged in a positive way in seeking change. And so, when I had a chance to come this morning to share a general sense with you of where we are and where we're going, I want to start with that spirit. I think the two analogs for where we are today is 1977 and 1993. And I want to start with this understanding that the Republicans failed to deliver badly enough that they lost the 2006 election. And then they failed to deliver during the Wall Street crisis, and they lost the 2008 election. And the country actually wanted change, but as my daughter, Jackie Cushman, who writes a column, wrote, people voted for change they could believe in and found out they'd elected somebody who wanted to change what they believe. And where President Obama had, I think, a remarkable opportunity to bring the country together. And at the time of his inauguration, I thought he had a great opportunity to reach out, to be genuinely bipartisan, and to work together in a slow, transparent, and creative way. Unfortunately, the socialist wing of the Democratic Party understood that this was the great moment, that people like Henry Waxman, who was first elected in 1972, who was a Hollywood liberal and anti-war left-winger, has spent 37 years trying to get to socialized medicine, and finally he had his moment. Nancy Pelosi, who has never seen a tax increase she didn't admire, ended up in a situation where this was their moment. And so what you had was enormous pressure on the president to do what I think his underlying beliefs made him comfortable doing. That is, to try to pass legislation so far to the left that you could not allow the American people to read it. And the first warning signal was the stimulus package, which was $787 billion, which we had to pass immediately, so rapidly that no one could actually read it. And so members of Congress voted yes without knowing what they were voting on, to find out later that, in fact, most of it would not even be spent this year. And you'll remember, they promised us, if we pass the stimulus package, we will cap unemployment at 8%. The President may have noticed yesterday on the way back from Copenhagen that it went to 9.8%. Now, that means that we're throwing away $787 billion in politicians spending our children and our grandchildren's money in a way that is totally out of control. At the same time, you now have a country where the largest insurance company has been run by the government, banks are being run by the government, the two of the three biggest auto companies are being run by the government is picking winners and losers and loaning money to new cars. I mean, go down the list. And what was amazing this week, and a sign of why this is very much like 1977 and 1993, is the New York Times on page one, hardly a right-wing publication, on page one, had a story this week about the collapse of socialism in Europe. Last Sunday, the German Socialist Party got the worst results since World War II. Only 23% of the German people voted for the Socialist Party. In Italy, the Socialist Party has been defeated. In France, President Sarkozy is a conservative who defeated the Socialist candidate. And hasn't the world changed when we end up applauding a French president? So again and again in the European parliamentary elections in June, it was the center-right which won and it was the left which was defeated. And the New York Times had a very interesting story in which you can imagine from their ideological perspective, they didn't quite make the direct contrast to the U.S. But I'm here to tell you that the socialist wing of the Democratic Party is going to lead the Democratic Party to a massive defeat comparable to 1980 and 1994. But that means that we're in one of the great educational learning moments in American history. That's what happened in 1977. Calista and I made a movie on Ronald Reagan called Rendezvous with Destiny. And when you watch 90 minutes of Ronald Reagan and you see him on the screen rather than read about him, you realize what an extraordinary effective teacher he was. He wasn't just a great communicator, he was a great educator. And what Jimmy Carter did is he set up a moment when the country knew things weren't working, and so they wanted real change. And Ronald Reagan came along and explained as a matter of principle why things weren't working. And people moved dramatically over the 4-year period of the Carter administration. Carter, remember, entered office with higher approval ratings than President Obama. And in 1977, the poll numbers on the day he was sworn in were higher for Jimmy Carter. But somewhere around 13% inflation, 22% interest rates, a 444-day Iranian hostage crisis, the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, and a gasoline shortage created by the federal government in which you could only buy gasoline every other day based on the last digit of your license plate. How many of you remember what that was like? Okay. A totally government-created shortage in which you ended up in a situation in which my good friend Dave Bossie of Citizens United told me one time he was 13 that year. And every morning his father would give him a screwdriver and send him out to swap license plates so that the car that needed gas had the right license plate. And I developed from that, here's a good test you can take back home for your friends. You can test whether they're liberal or conservative. If you're a conservative and you learn about a government program that's so dumb that 13-year-olds are being taught how to get around it, you want to repeal the program. If you're a liberal and you hear that story, you want to hire license plate police for every gas station. So this is a teachable moment. But for it to work, we have to do 3 things. And we can't avoid doing these 3 things. And by coming together like this and meeting with Americans for Prosperity and developing these ideas, you are setting yourself up as a citizen to do these 3 things. The first thing we have to do is we have to have candidates at every level who are dedicated to new solutions and to applying the principles that have made America great. Not just for president, not just for the Congress, not just for governor. There are 513,000 elected offices in the United States, from school board to city council to county commission, and we need commitment that if an incumbent isn't doing their job, we need to recruit somebody new. I don't care whether that new person is a Democrat or a Republican. I care that they're new.